Good afternoon, everybody. Again, good afternoon, and thank you all for coming for this session, Shaping the Palestinian Future, Voices of the Next Generation. My name is Samer Makhlouf. I am the CEO of a Palestinian organization called Zaman Palestine. Thank you. And I am going to be the moderator today for this session with my friends and colleagues. But before we start, I would like to ask you all to put your phones on silent so we do not disturb our speakers and the session in general. And I would like to also to mention that by the end of this session, we will give around 30 minutes for questions and answers. And I would like all those who would like to ask questions to line up here in the middle behind this microphone. And we will be taking 3 questions together and then have our speakers answer these questions. So since we are talking about the Palestinian future, which is something that is very hard to predict given the very unstable and changing environment that we live in a very troubled region, as you all know and follow up, we would like to give our distinguished guests and speakers to give a sense about how they see the future or the near future and how they work with the future generation in creating a better future for the Palestinians and the Israelis and the region in general. I would like to start with giving a very quick introduction and the context about the reality right now, which I am sure that most of you are aware and know. The Palestinian-Israeli situation has been deteriorating for a long time since the peace process started. And with the peace process more than 25 years ago, the hopes were very high and people were really hoping that we were very close to closing a deal and striking a deal, and a deal that will start a new era of peace and cooperation and better future for both people. But unfortunately, these talks collapsed and we witnessed the breakout of the Second Intifada. And if you all remember, this is the time where the notion or the myth of there is no partner was created, and specifically by the former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, when he started blaming the Palestinians and saying that there was no partner for peace, and this is where that notion started. And since then, not only the situation has been deteriorating in a very serious manner, despite that we had several rounds and several times of negotiations and renewed negotiations with Olmert, and the last one was with the John Kerry Secretary of State effort. And in each round, the optimism was very high, and when these peace talks were failed, people left with more hopelessness and more disparity, and the damage was very big. The developments that happened as well in the region in the past years with the so-called Arab Spring and the violence that we saw and witnessed in the Arab region, and internally within the Palestinian situation, which did not get any better, where we had a coup committed by Hamas and the separation between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and the internal division inside the Palestinian territory, which affected our ability to deal with the biggest problem, which is the occupation and the conflict, and limited our ability to deal with this. These developments showed that there is a serious problem on the other side, and created or enhanced the idea and the notion that there is no partner for peace. The developments that happened inside the Israeli society as well, by electing the most right-wing government in Israel's history, And since this government was elected, and the policies and the aggressive policies against the Palestinians, expanding settlements, aggression, and legislations against Palestinians, and you name it, many things that happened, also created a very similar situation on the Palestinian side. So after many years of a failed peace process, we found ourselves in a very, very troubled community. We found ourselves in a very unstable society, and we are witnessing right now a very high state of hopelessness, which I consider one of the biggest dangers that any community might face. The level of hopelessness and the level of disappointment among the Palestinians is unprecedented. And that is not a very good or healthy environment for anyone who is working with the new generation to create a better future. And these negativities in our society and in the region are major obstacles in front of progress and in front of having big impact through our work and through the work that organizations like our speakers do on the ground. So I would like to start by introducing our guest speakers here. I would like to start with Huda Barkoub, who is the regional director of OLMEP in Palestine and in the region, and Niveen Sanduka, who is a social activist, and Walid Isa is the U.S. Program Officer of OLMEP. I'm going to give just a very short and quick introduction, and I will give them the chance to introduce themselves the way they like, to speak about themselves quickly. And I would like to start with Huda by asking each of our speakers, what are the major challenges that you face on the ground? What are the major problems and obstacles that you face in your day-to-day work on the ground? And what are the biggest causes for the state of hopelessness that you see among your audiences and constituencies? And also, I would like to hear from you, how are you dealing with such obstacles? Because I know that you are all doing good work on the ground and you became expert in dealing with this issue. But I would like to hear about how you shift the state of hopelessness and this negative energy into a positive one through your work. And finally, how through your work you try to show a partner, and whether you believe that showing a Palestinian partner is essential and important. If yes, why? If no, explain how you see this specific issue. Huda.
Thank you, Samir, and Masal Khair. Hello, everybody. It's very good to see familiar faces here. Thank you so much for taking some time and come and listen to this. First of all, I have to say that one of the biggest challenges working with the Palestinians on daily basis is the fact that we have not seen any appreciation of the effort that the Palestinian as people and as leadership put towards peace. If any, we are always blamed for not giving enough, for not compromising enough, for not being good enough partners. And a keen look at the history of the Palestinian people since 1974, when Abu Ammar, Allah yarhamu, Yasser Arafat, went to Geneva and urged the entire world not to let go of the olive branch that he was carrying. We haven't seen any effort from the international community, for that matter, or the Israeli governments after the assassination of Rabin, that acknowledges the fact that the Palestinians have extended a long hand for peace. And I want to give you one image that stayed in my mind for a long time. After the famous White House lone shake hand, the Palestinians sent off the Israeli soldiers who were shooting at them a few days before that shake hand. The Palestinian youth, the Palestinian women, the Palestinian activists sent off the Israeli army with flowers and roses. And we are still getting bullets for that. And this is the challenge that we are facing with youth, mainly in Palestine, on daily basis, is how can we make an argument of us believing in nonviolent resistance, believing in peace, when Hamas comes in, kidnaps one soldier, and the next day the entire world is on its knees begging Hamas to release the soldier in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, while 20 years of negotiations did not give the Palestinian Authority anything. So the argument with the youth in Palestine, whether nonviolence and peace activism work versus power, violent power. And this is a challenge for educators, for activists, for women, for fathers. We have not seen any acknowledgement so far from the world to the effort that the Palestinian society have put towards peace. And I think that's the biggest challenge. The Palestinians need to know that they have a partner in the world, in the United States, in Europe, and also a partner within the Israeli society. So that's one of the challenges that we are facing on a daily basis.
Thank you, Huda. And Naveen, if you can answer the same questions, but if you can also please give us a sense of how much is the level of support for the two-state solution among the Palestinians, and if this support is decreasing, and why you see this support decreasing or increasing, based on how you respond to this question. And also, I would like you to answer if you see that there is, or the Palestinians, do the Palestinians see a partner on the other side? So we are always asking, to the Palestinians to show the goodwill and be showing a partner for peace. Do we see a partner for peace in Israel?
Sure. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for those questions. Also, not only a social activist, but I'm also a co-director of an Israeli-Palestinian organization called IPCRI. And basically what I'm about to present is based on our work as well. So I think the main challenge that the Palestinians are facing, especially maybe the Palestinian youth, is a lack of vision, not only a lack of hope, but a lack of vision of what Palestine should look like, the free independent state of Palestine. And let me just give you some statistics that were actually published on the 1st of April. It's not an April Fool's joke, what I'm about to tell you. So basically it says, if you look at the level of satisfaction of the Palestinians who live in Gaza and the Palestinians who live in the West Bank, only 5% of the people in Gaza are satisfied with their lives. And only 20% are satisfied with their lives in the West Bank. This is very dangerous because it means you can basically end your life because you're not satisfied with it. On top of that, 45% of the Palestinians living in Gaza want to leave Gaza. It's that difficult living over there. If you look at the statistics that deal with the political situation, so 48% support a two-state solution, while 50% oppose it. And this is have really dramatically increased over the past couple of years. You have 57% of the Palestinian population that says that a solution is no longer practical. So Palestinians have lost hope even at the level of finding a political solution and believing that there is no partner at the Israeli side. 28% support a one-state solution. On top of that, they say that in 10 years or in 100 years, the situation will remain as it is, which means that 9% only believe that there could be a political solution, a political peace agreement, and 77% say they don't feel safe at all with Israel, which means that Palestinians really do not believe anymore that there is an Israeli partner on the other side. Some other things says that, and this is also very important, 39% of the Palestinian population believe that or do not participate anymore in non-violent resistance. And a large percentage agree that we should go back to armed intifada, which means that on all levels, it's actually going back and deteriorating. That said, this is all, and also like what are the main pressing issues right now for the Palestinians? They believe the main pressing issue is, first of all, ending the occupation. It's the political level. The second thing is unemployment. Third and fourth is the siege of Gaza and the internal Palestinian administrative issues. If you look at the rate of unemployment in Gaza is 47%. And in the West Bank, it's 12%. And we're talking about a society that is 50% of it are youth. So you can imagine the case of hopelessness and the case of lack of vision of what the Palestinians actually have, which also means that most of them believe that in 10 years or 100 years, we are going to live together in one state, and it's going to be an apartheid state. And for me personally, I always wonder, is this really what the Jewish people want? Do they really want to be the oppressor and take the whole history of what they have been through and still pose the same injustice on another people? I think now that the Israelis have a very hard job to do, which is to prove to us, the Palestinians, that we have a partner on the other side. You cannot keep, like what the recent things that happened in Gaza right now, we cannot turn a blind eye to it right now. I'm asking every single Israeli or any single human being who actually believes in human rights and in peace to actually look at what's happening. You cannot turn a blind eye and say, I don't know what's happening. Now that said, what we're trying to do at IPCRI is we're actually trying to defy those stereotypes, to show that there is a partner on both sides of the border. How do we do that? We actually bring people together on joint issues that are of interest to both sides. Environment, for example, water, high-tech, entrepreneurship. Those are issues that are important for both sides. And we bring people together to see that there is a partner on the other side. We bring people together to see the potential of actually having a peace agreement and ending the occupation. This potential is both economic and social. And at the same time, we're trying to work with policy and decision makers and taking one policy at a time and trying to change it. This is at least our theory of change and how we're trying to build partnerships between both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. It's great to be here. Does it work? Good? Okay, wonderful. My name is Walid Isa. I grew up in the Haisha refugee camp. Before I speak about the challenges, I would like to share a little bit of my story because it's to just make it to give you an opportunity to see how much this topic is very important to me personally. The youth is, to me personally, is the most important topic that we must discuss. As a 14 years old, grew up in the Haisha refugee camp. I'm number 8. I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers. When I was 14 years old, in the heart of the city of Bethlehem, I was in a coffee shop. My school teacher was driving towards the coffee shop. I left outside to go greet him and say hi to my school teacher and his daughter who was in the car, a couple of years younger than me. Suddenly, a big white van coming from the other side trapped me in the middle, and big scary men holding fully automatic guns, they jumped out of the car. I ran back to the coffee shop as a 14 years old, and I started peering from the window, and suddenly the faces of my school teacher and his daughter started disappearing, and all I see is blood just covering the window. I was the first one to run outside the coffee shop and go open the door to see my teacher and use my white shirt to wipe the blood. It was a big trauma for me personally to see my school teacher. His daughter, she died and he survived, but that was a defining moment in my life. At that moment, I saw nothing holy about the Holy Land. I saw nothing beautiful about that piece of land, no matter what's Israeli or Palestinian. All I wanted to do is revenge. I wanted to find an AK-47 big enough to kill these men who killed the childhood in me. My dad, he took me home and he sent me to a school that focused in healing and nonviolence. And through the school, I ended up going to Minnesota. I lived with an American family, my American mom, my American dad. Hi, Kate and Steve, I love you. And I thought I'm going to go to Minnesota, but I will go back to my AK-47. I go check Mall of America, I will go see Minnesota, but I will go back to revenge. But when I met people, Native American, African American, people from different cultures, it was that moment that I realized that it's bigger than actually AK-47. It's about building cultures and building connections. So I know for a fact, from my own experience, that the youth, it could be a ticking bomb that would actually be a disaster or a great opportunity if the energy is going to the right way. I think the Palestinian youth are actually suffering from external and internal suffering. They internally, they are looked at nothing but political capital. In 2017, for example, by itself, there was 7 conferences addressing the Palestinian youth. There was 2 conferences in January, one in Cairo and one in Ramallah, one from the Fatah, Ramallah, and Fatah, Mohammed Dahlan in Cairo, sending messages to the Palestinian youth. There was a conference in March, sending messages to the Palestinian youth from Tehran, and one from Qatar, and one from, in April, one from Turkey. So all these conflicting messages sending to the youth, to the Palestinian youth, it giving them a conflict of identity, and it's a problem. The Palestinian youth today, internally, they are lack a leadership, they lack a mentorship, they lack a role model that they look up to, and they see him as an example for them. We need Edward Said, we need Mahmoud Darwish, again to come back, so the Palestinian youth can see an example of what would do living for Palestine, not dying for Palestine. The other thing, thank you. Externally, there is many problems that actually hurting the Palestinian youth. First, the occupation. You know, there's no question. I'm not going to tell this audience what is the occupation, because this is a fundamental problem that the Palestinians are suffering from, and the youth, they see it every single day. Today, 20 years ago, after Oslo, I could bring my cars and pretend like it's a King Hussein and play with it. But today, they actually can go to the internet. They can see how you live here. They can see how I live in Minnesota. My nephew, who's 10 years old, 12 years old, he knows about my neighborhood in Minnesota more than actually as much as I know, because he has the access to see it. They see how they live in France. They see how they live in Tel Aviv. They see how they live in Minnesota, and they see what does it mean to live in the occupation or under a refugee camp. So they are not the same. They have the access, but they know how much they are suffering. So for them, the occupation is something that they see it every day. They see it when they check the internet. They see it when they look at the TV. They see it when they walk outside their homes. And it's actually creating a trauma every single day to them. The other external issue, that the youth have no clue. The Palestinian youth, I spent 4 months, just came back. I tried to talk to many Palestinian youth from refugee camp to the cities, and asked them, what do you think about the Jewish community in America? What do you think about the Israelis? It's a very simplistic answer. It's a very, very naive answer. The Palestinian youth no longer have access to meet Israeli youth in a mutual, respectful platform. As much as there is organization that they are doing great work, I think the need is way higher than the resources provided for these organizations. The other thing externally, which is the Palestinian economy is a donor aid, is an aid-based economy. So the USAID will decide that they wanted to give a grant for the youth. So there is a big economic development coming from Washington, D.C., because they did a grant about youth in Ghana. They come take they take the opportunity, and they do it for Palestinians. So most of the projects that they have been done in the Palestinian side for the youth has been done without a strategy, been done because there is an RFE outside there that someone wanted to actually build a program. And it's make it worse and worse and worse. Development for the youth, it cannot be coming from outside. We have so many organizations that they are doing great work, such as the organizations that they are here with the youth, and we need to give them the opportunity. Here in the US, we say often that you give a man a fish and he will eat for a day. You will teach him how to fish and he will eat for the rest of his life. But both of them are wrong in that context. Because it's not about teaching them how to fish. It's not about giving them fish. It's about giving them an opportunity to go fishing based on their own, reserve their authentic voice. And that's what's actually missing in the RFE, project-based economic development for the youth, for the Palestinians. There is other issues that it's actually affecting the Palestinian youth, but these are the three main challenges that I would like to focus on today. Thanks.
Thank you, Walid. Actually, I would like to have three follow-up questions for our speakers today. And I would like to start with Huda and allow me to play the role of the devil's advocate. And I really appreciate the work that you do, but let me ask you a question about what also Walid mentioned about the effectiveness of your work. And you refer to the people-to-people work as a very important component that might heal the very bad situation and get us closer to a peaceful solution for the conflict. Do you think that we have enough time to do that? Because like the people-to-people work is a long-term approach. And given the statistics that Naveen gave, I'm afraid that we are approaching and getting very close to an irreversible point where the two-state solution might be gone and not applicable anymore. Do you think that this is the most effective approach that will get us or save the two-state solution? Or is there another way of injecting hope in the hearts and minds of the Palestinians and Israelis? Do you think that it is more effective to show Palestinians and Israelis sitting in one room discussing important and critical issues, or do we have to show a critical mass in each society that is really marching non-violently towards achieving the national goals?
Yes. We cannot say that people-to-people work is going to bring the two-state solution to reality. If we are the ones to dictate a solution on people, then we will fail miserably, just like the policy makers and the politicians in the world. But I am coming from a place of responsibility. Each and every one of us has a responsibility towards their own people. And my responsibility towards the Palestinian youth, specifically, that my 28 nieces and nephews are part of, is not to let go of that despair without discussing it with them. Most of my work with the Alliance for Middle East Peace now is focused on building sustainable constituencies for people who can be resilient enough to keep hope. But I'm not saying that we are going to be saying that I have a dream and in few years the dream will be realized. That's not the goal in Palestine. I think what the people-to-people organizations are doing, sometimes in very, very difficult situation, is that they are holding the ground for people to continue having an outlet, an alternative. Because seriously, what would be the alternative? And I have to tap on the fact that the Palestinians could and should and maybe have million reasons to be angry and hateful on daily basis. And I want to address the Israeli people specifically and the Jewish community entirely, that if you are coming from fear, approaching the Palestinians in general from a place of fear, and I understand and I respect the fact that the collective trauma is still very much alive within the consciousness of the Jewish people and the Israeli people in particular. I have a million reasons for you to believe that the Palestinians are not going to be the ones who push you to the sea. This is just a dominant narrative that has been used by many entities to manipulate that fear. And I don't think that the Israeli society and the Jewish people should continue giving in to that fear. And I have one evidence that I mentioned yesterday. The 100,000 workers who cross the checkpoints on daily basis, that maybe everyone in the world thinks that they shouldn't, but they should, and they must, because that's their own survival mechanism. They go, they cross the checkpoint, and I wish one of you can stand with me at 2 a.m. in the morning and watch what happens to them. And yet they cross and they go and they do the job and they send their kids to schools. Isn't that a liberation action? I don't think that people to people appreciate it. I think what we are missing here is the fact that we don't have a role model. And if the people-to-people community is going to provide one role model to follow, I think we should continue doing it. I want you also to understand that the Palestinian people have succeeded immensely to bring themselves from a place, no visibility at all in the dominant narrative, that they didn't exist, that it was a land without people, to a place where they are sitting on the table fully being partners. So this is a huge success for the Palestinian people under the circumstances that they have lived in. When the leadership asked us to do negotiations, we supported it. When the leadership asked us to stop communicating with the Israelis, we did it. When they created an office to build relationships with the Israeli society, we supported it. So there is no lack of willingness to bring opportunities for the Palestinians and the Israelis to meet, and they do meet, sometimes in very life-threatening situations, by thousands. And I would just remind you of the image of Women Wage Peace marching with Palestinian women in Jericho, calling the entire world to unite for peace. So I don't believe that we will all be Martin Luther Kings or Gandhis, but we have thousands of them among us. What we need is to have Martin Luther Kings and Gandhis in the international community.
بدك تحكي okay. No, go ahead.
Hello? Yeah. Works? So I just wanted to add to Huda's, I think the Palestinian internally, they have to work on hope and in defining what do we exactly, the messages that we wanted to give to the Palestinians, and the PA need to actually allow them to be part of the process. They need to open the space to them. There is no space for the Palestinian youth today. Unfortunately, if you're talking, there is the distribution of wealth in Ramallah in the West Bank. It's a huge. When you have someone's son receiving $8,000 or $9,000 a month, and someone, because he's not someone's son in Ramallah, that is not receiving that much money, that is a problem. So we have to redefine our nationality, our patriotism to the Palestinians. Like Mahmoud Darwish, when he said that I came for a rising sons, not to witness their settings. I don't need a fascist to triumph. I just want a child to share the day of laughter. This is what Mahmoud Darwish told us. We need to allow the youth to understand how politics work, how the process works. It should not be no longer the PA is an exclusive club for some and exclude others. There has to be a way that the youth learn and understand what does it mean to be politics, how democracy work, and they need to be part of it. From the Israeli side, I think there is some internal work they need to do. Today we have no two-state solution or three-state solution, we have 10-state solutions. When you go to Tel Aviv, and I have friends, and I ask them, have you ever been in the West Bank? No, we don't go. Have you ever been in a settlement? It was like, no, I don't support the occupation. I don't go to the settlement. So you see that the Israeli society is divided today. And Tel Aviv is very comfortable with the high tech, with so many things. And the Palestinian youth, they don't see the picture of the people of Tel Aviv. They see the people of the Hebron settlements, which is really, that's how they define the pictures of the Israelis. The Israelis internally, they need to talk and they need to do a lot of work to say that our image is not only that settler who's actually throwing garbage in Hebron to his neighbor, to Palestinian neighbor. And that's internally. And externally, I think the Palestinian and the Israelis, we need to support them. People-to-people work is not only a cute little thing. Hope is not a privilege to them. Hope is a necessity in that region. Hope is not something that we have the privilege to pick or not. It's very stubborn. To me, hope is that stubborn thing that keep insisting every single day, no matter how hard it is. But there is one thing that we need, all of us, especially here in the US. Like I know for a fact, if it's up to the Jewish and the Palestinians, the conflict will be ended. Because Rabbi Hillel told us one day that if I'm only for myself, then who am I? If I'm not for others, then who's for me? If not now, then when? I mean, the Jewish ethical and the reality will never ever allow the Jewish people to treat the Palestinian other than, and that's a fact. We must not allow anyone to hijack our narrative. The Palestinians today in the US and others, there is a certain groups who are hijacking the Palestinian narrative to serve their ideological purposes. And we have seen this in the US. Anti-Semitism should not be justified by pro-Palestine group. And at the same time, the pro-Israel camp need to understand that don't sacrifice your ethical and your morality because a narrow-minded ideological support from Christian blah, blah, blah for Israel, right? So these people should not hijack and take over the Jewish narrative of supporting of Israel. I'm really concerned because for the first time ever, that I feel that the U.S. support to Israel is turning from a political support to ideological support, which is very dangerous for me personally, and I think this need to stop. We must claim our narrative and get back and say this is a political conflict and it will end and we have a solution and it's the two-state solution. That is the only solution. All other solutions is an illusion and we have to accept that fact.
Okay, I just want to add something to that, since you mentioned the role of the U.S. Also, the statistics show that the Palestinians have lost faith in the American role, specifically after the last statements by President Donald Trump. So basically, the U.S. have lost this its unbiased, neutral broker, being an honest broker. They've lost that stance. So any initiative that's also going to come right now from the U.S. administration is not going to be welcomed by the Palestinians, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you all. I would like to ask Naveen a last question, and then we start with the questions and answers from the audience. Given that you said that the American administration is seen very biased by the Palestinians, and you mentioned about the lack of vision among the Palestinians, which I agree partially with, because internally we are in deadly need for a vision that will get out of this deadlock that we are witnessing on many fronts inside the Palestinian society. But politically, I think we do have a vision, and I would like to refer to the peace plan, the Palestinian peace plan, which, by the way, is the first time in history we have a Palestinian peace plan. Usually we have the American Peace Initiative or the Kerry parameters or Clinton parameters, even the initiative by the civil society in Israel, which is the Israeli Peace Initiative. But for the first time, we have other than the Arab Peace Initiative, we have the Palestinian Peace Initiative, which is presented officially by the Palestinian president. So I could consider that this is the plan that he presented in front of the UN Security Council last January. And I would like to ask you if we could consider or if we consider this as a strategy for peace, how are we going, or how are we able to advance this, and how are we going to promote it internally within the Palestinians, among the Palestinians? What is needed to inject hope in Palestine and among the Palestinians, but also how are we going to promote this plan among the Israelis from your point of view and from your work that you do as well?
Really? I think it's a very difficult question to answer. I'll tell you why. Because I think the Palestinians have done a lot to actually show that to show the Israeli public that you have a partner on the Palestinian side. Like, for example, the Palestinians have created the Outreach Committee, which is part of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, to just do outreach to the Israeli public and discuss with the Israeli public the Palestinian narrative, show them that they actually have a partner on the Palestinian side, to work with peace-building NGOs. So far, I don't think it has been effective or it has had impact at all, because there's still the narrative amongst the Israelis, which is hijacked by the current Israeli government, that there is no partner, that Palestinians are terrorists and we want to throw you at the sea, which is not true. I don't want to throw anybody at the sea. So, but I think that that has also led to another problem for the Palestinian Authority, is that they have actually also lost connection with their own Palestinian constituency. So I don't really envy the Palestinian Authority in that. In one way, they're trying their best to outreach for the Israeli public, and they're faced with an Israeli right-wing government, extremist right-wing government. And the other side, the Palestinians view them as traitors, unfortunately. The latest statistics show that more than 60% of the Palestinian public do not approve of the Palestinian Authority security apparatus and coordination that exist. So I don't know how it's going to work. I think it actually would take to create a strategy between peace-building organizations and the Palestinian Authority, to create a strategy that would also include youth representative, women representatives, people from Gaza, people from Jerusalem, to do actually an outreach, how we're going to promote our peace plan as well. And at the same time, let's also be honest, we cannot keep putting the Palestinians as equal as the Israelis. In terms of power, Israel is the most powerful. We are the weak ones, and we're always asked to protect the stronger one. So it's quite problematic.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that we have to create an accountability force. We have tried a grassroots effort and bottom up. And I think we need to have some more engagement from here to support the effort that we do on the ground over there. We're not doing enough. Let's not kidding ourselves. Let's not claim that we're doing great, we're here, we're supporting, we care. I mean, we can do more. We can do a lot more. These organizations that they work really hard to promote these agenda of peace and connect people with each other and bridge the gaps, they should not focus on funding and resources. In the last 10 years, with what's happening in the rest of the Middle East, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, all the major foundations, all the major organizations, they have been rechanneling their funds to other parts of the region, which makes sense because they have a lot of crisis happening. But we need to actually find a new mechanism, and we need to support, increase the funding for these organizations that they are doing great work on the ground, especially from the US. because we need them to focus on the work, not on the fundraising. We need them to cooperate, not to compete. And this is our challenge here in the US, and we must work on it. And the defense budget, instead of actually, this is something important. This is, instead of actually giving weapons to protect someone, building a bridge. And we need to start sending and funding, and the US aid and the US government, they need to take these programs seriously. Because today, people-to-people program is the future, and we have to start today, and we have to increase the funding to them.
Well, thank you all, and I can see there is a big line already. So I would like you please to ask your question shortly and directly to the point. If you have a comment, please say it quickly, but please jump into the question. And if you have your question directed specifically to one of our speakers, please say the name of the speaker. And please.
I'd like you all to comment on Abu Mazen. You've mentioned there's no leadership, that there's no models for young people. Who do you see coming up? He's an old man. Who's behind him? That's one thing. Two, Gaza, the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. How do you see some connection? It's been failed attempts to unite, and then you have Hamas, who Israel won't talk to. And finally, you mentioned Gaza. It's a mess. From the Palestinian perspective, what's the solution to Gaza other than lift the embargo, because you still have Hamas and you don't have any real authority? So please answer those. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Hello? Is this on? Let's see. All right, so a couple things. It was mentioned that the Palestinians haven't been acknowledged as a partner of peace since Rabin was assassinated, but in 2000, Ehud Barak offered between 92 and 97% of what they were asking for, and the second Intifada came shortly after that. So I didn't really like that comment. Also, the whole push into the sea, the Hamas charter calls for the entire destruction of Israel. So I think we should be realistic that their charter still says that they want to destroy the entirety of Israel. So my question is, what are Palestinians doing internally? And I love that Walid touched on the youth, but to change the political structure of what's going on in Gaza and what's going on in the West Bank, and hopefully to bring them together, because I think we can all admit that there are clear deficiencies in the political structure of what the Palestinians have right now.
Hi, thank you very much for your points. I would like you to elaborate a bit more about what you're seeing on the street, on the political map. The support for Fatah and Hamas has never been a majority. There's a mainstream in Palestine that votes one way or the other. So now with the frustration that people have with both Fatah and Hamas, right? They feel both of them have failed them. Do you see people going towards a third party, or do you see a movement in Palestine that's going to push or pull, in fact, Hamas and Fatah towards another direction? Because both Fatah and Hamas show elasticity in that sense.
Can you detail the differences between the current Palestinian peace plan and previous peace plans, and how that will ensure that the future Palestinian state remains democratic?
Sorry, what was the other peace plan? The Palestinian peace plan and the other?
Peace plan versus previous peace plan. Peace plans that impose the Arab peace plans, the American peace plans, Israeli peace plans,
Okay.
Iraq.
Thank you. So we'll stop here and have our speakers answer these questions, and then we get another set of questions.
I wanted to talk about Hamas and the West Bank and Gaza. Look, the goal is to create a viable Palestinian state, not just the Palestinian state that can operate as a state. Gaza is part of the state, and the West Bank is part of the state. Neither one of them could actually survive, build a state without the other one. And we must actually accept that fact. We should not take the West Bank for granted. There is a lot of stress, there is a lot of fear, and the youth are suffering. And we saw waves of violence, waves of 15, 14 years old kid going, stabbing, we need to address these things that are in the West Bank. But look, The youth should not only be a political capital for the Hamas or Fatah. Whenever Hamas feels like they are losing the ground, they need to send the youth to do riots or the West Bank. I think today, unfortunately, we have to create an accountability force from the outside. The Palestinian diaspora and us who's outside, we need to actually work and create an accountability. When Salam Fayyad was in office, he was fighting corruptions, building institutions, and that was a big threat to a lot of the people. Us here in the room and everybody, we should have stood up and supported him, and we said, no, we want him to be in office because we need to fight corruption and we need to build institutions. Our responsibility today that we need to support the good leaders who are making difference in the ground. We should not let them go away, and that is a lose for us and for them. In terms of a third party, I think from in 2006 when the election happened, I was just turned 18. For the first time in my life, I'm gonna practice democracy. I'm gonna go vote. So I went to vote. I remember this very well. There was, Hamas, and there is Fatah. On one side, I mean, we've never been ideological. I don't support, kind of ideologies. And the other thing, I know that the experience with Fatah was a lot of corruptions. As an 18-year-old kid at that time, I just put it empty. The paper, we did not even write anything. I could not have the moral responsibility as an 18-year-old kid to actually vote. We need to open the space to a third party. And unfortunately, 3 years ago, when I started working to start an organization in the West Bank, till today, after spending around $15,000 to register an organization, a 501c3, a simple organization to support the Palestinian youth, till today is not registered in the Palestinian side because apparently they don't want foreigners or outsiders to influence the internal politics. We must accept that we need a third party and we need to open the space for democracy. And the liberal Jewish organizations, they should stop just cheering for whoever tell them what they wanted to hear. If they need to create an accountability. Not only tell you I want a two-state solution, you need also to be a leader that fight corruption and building institutions. Not just take what I wanted to hear and dismiss corruption and all other things because he's telling me what I wanted to hear as an organization that support my two-state or my mission. So we have to connect accountability, fighting corruption, building institutions with the talking point that we receive when these leaders or these institutions speak to foreigners or the Americans over here. And we should not let Hamas and Fatah deal with each other without an accountability from the outside.
Thank you, Walid.
The leadership question, as I mentioned, we live in a leaderless world, and we actually have no alternative. That's why the investment in youth, I hate the word empowerment, but creating an agency for the youth is important for those who think long-term plans. In Palestine, I don't think that we have an alternative, but to be fair, also, the Palestinian Authority leadership has been compromised. Its power has been compromised by the lack of honest brokership or balanced brokership in the Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations. Every time the Palestinian Authority offers something, it's rejected. Sometimes, when the Palestinian also are offered something that is related to Jerusalem, everyone in this room know how Jerusalem is dangerous in terms of political power. So it's not fair to blame it only on the Palestinian Authority as an authority, because their authority has been compromised. And I'll mention one example. When at night the Palestinian police are asked by the Israeli army to go into their stations and close their doors and not be in the streets, so for the army to come and arrest Palestinians, that's a compromisation of the power of the Palestinian Authority. And so that's a loss of a role model. That's a loss in faith in the power of the Palestinians. Palestinian Authority. When the American side, that is supposed to be an honest broker, takes sides all the time and puts pressure on the Palestinian Authority all the time to set it to failure, also they will lose their agency within the Palestinian society. So to be honest with you, there is no faith in Hamas or in Fatah in that sense. And I talk to youth all the time. There is no alternative also. Read about the change that Hamas has done in its charter, please. Just punch it on Google and you will know. Stop giving in to the dominant narrative, please. Be informed more about it. Hamas should not and cannot be the only sole representative of the Palestinians, and you should not judge us based on Hamas. And I would say that the Israeli government sits with Hamas and talks with Hamas because they understand the language of Hamas, and the Israeli government supports the power that Hamas gets. Every time they bomb Gaza, Hamas becomes the only entity that defends Gaza, and that's why people believe in Hamas as a defender. So stop blaming people for that power manipulation in the region. If anything that we need to focus on is how to save Gazans from being killed by every entity that has power on it, including Egypt. So I am not shying away from saying that Hamas has responsibility, the Palestinian Authority has a responsibility, and Israel has a responsibility. And each one of these powers is contributing to the power of Hamas and the stronghold of the people in Gaza. One thing I would blame Gazans for is why not taking to the streets and taking down every power that oppresses them. And when they tried in March 31st, they were killed by snipers, and the whole movement of non-violent resistance was hijacked by Hamas. And if you want to read more, I wrote an article about it at the forward. It was a very courageous statement from me, saying that we need to take responsibility for what happened to Gaza. So don't come here and tell us that we are defending Hamas. If any, we are resisting in unbelievable conditions the monopoly of power between the two of them. And if we have an agenda as people, is to bring them together to create a unified unit for the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Huda. Okay, let's take 3 more questions and keep your note for the coming questions. Please go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, in the face of when diplomacy, electoral process, lobbying, and also violent protests have all failed, what can we as people outside of the region of conflict in America, but also in Israel and also in Palestine, what can we do to instill new leadership and to reinstill hope when the conventional methods have often been stabbed in the back? I'd like to.
Hi, I'm Diane. I'm actually originally from Uruguay, so I can speak from like a different perspective from the American jury perspective about the conflict. Oftentimes I hear that this conflict has not been resolved or it cannot be resolved because the Palestinian authorities or their wannabe authorities do not recognize the state of Israel and do not recognize its right to exist. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate more on that, and also if you have any statistics about, what do the Palestinian people think in that regards? Whether do they believe that Israel has the right to exist?
Hi. So I've heard floating around this idea of a Marshall Plan for the Middle East a lot from Peter Geffen and other people, sort of this idea that by bolstering the Palestinian economy, you would raise the statistics of happiness and fulfillment and hopefully lower terrorism. So I'm wondering what you guys think of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll stop here and we'll have our speakers answer. So we have about the failed diplomacy, what are you going to do, and the leadership. A very important question about recognizing Israel's right to exist. I would like one or more of you to respond to this. And finally, the Marshall Plan that this gentleman heard about or keep hearing about. So, please.
Going back a little bit to history, how do you think the Palestinian Authority came about? The Palestinian Authority came about after the Palestinian Liberation Organization recognized the existence of Israel and signed the Oslo Accords with Israel. So the Palestinian Authority itself is the result of the recognition of Israel. Even Hamas itself changed its charter, and even Hamas itself participated in the Legislative Council, which were also part of the Oslo Accord, which means that we do believe in the existence of Israel. We do believe that they have a right to exist. What we're asking for is a Palestinian state next to the Israeli state, neighbors. So yeah, again, the whole narrative is being hijacked by the extremists who actually want the Israelis specifically to live in fear all the time. It's a very good mechanism to control people. On that sense, I'll just also wanted to say one thing on the Fatah-Hamas thing. I think that both Fatah and Hamas came about as leadership through the First Intifada, because they were leaders through the First Intifada. They were the ones who actually led the people along other political parties. And let's not forget that there were democratic elections in 2006. But the world did not like the results of those democratic elections. And they punished us for practicing our rights, instead of just giving us 4 years to see where it's going to take us. And until today, as Palestinians, we are paying the price of this punishment. We don't have elections at the presidential level or at the legislative, which is like kind of the parliament or Congress level. And if we do, there's not going to be any sort of a third party. Even statistics show that Fatah and Hamas are going to win. Fatah will lead, Hamas a little bit less, and only 9% will elect third parties. And that's basically because there's no space where you can actually foster and grow a third option for Palestinians. There's not an emerging leader in that sense. And also something else, what can you do as the US? I think you already answered it, Huda. Please change. I think you have the power. You are the Americans. You know how lobbying works and advocacy work in the US Congress. And I think you just should support the people who you can actually affect to bring a change to that region. So yeah, we need your support to also do your own internal homework in the States in that sense.
Okay, thank you. We'll get 3 more questions, but I would like to ask our speakers to keep their answers a little bit short so we can have as many questions as we can. Please.
Hello, I'm with One Voice from DePaul University. Walid, you mentioned earlier that there aren't enough opportunities for Israeli and Palestinian youth to interact. I was wondering what you believe the role of public education has in facilitating those interactions.
Hello, I'm Terry Alter. I'm from American University's J Street chapter. I was just wondering, since we're talking about kind of measures from the Palestinian peace camp, I was just wondering what your thoughts on BDS is, since considering the fact that BDS has not only gone predominant support within Palestinians, but it's also becoming a huge issue in America as well, considering the recent anti-BDS legislation that's been proposed all over America.
Hi, I heard a moderate Palestinian spokesman speak on PBS, and he was talking about 2 issues that Palestinians believe are the cornerstone, and one is the right of return and for Palestinian refugees. The other is return to the 1967 border, pre-67 borders. And he said those are 2 critical issues that cannot be compromised. Do you agree with that or not?
Well, let's stop here and then we'll get the last round. So we have 3 questions that are important, I guess. So a speaker said about the right of return and 1967 borders, the BDS, and the interaction between Israelis and Palestinians. So please feel free to answer whatever question you would like to answer.
Take the BDS because I was waiting for the question. So thank you for mentioning. So we are a society just like any other society, even if we live under occupation, and we have to face oppressive systems internally and externally on daily basis. But the democratic nature of our conversations are funny and very, very creative. So when you think of us as a community that has the capacity to have an intellectual approach to the conflict, BDS is part of it. I know, I understand completely the threat that it imposes psychologically speaking, and even sometimes emotionally speaking on the Israeli society. And the word BDS could get you out of the room if you are in a meeting, in a peace meeting with peace activists sometimes. But we have to admit that in the absence of any political will to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and bring justice to the Palestinians and to the Israelis, bring security to the Palestinians and the Israelis, bring peace to the Palestinians and the Israelis, everyone has a free run on doing their own theory of change. So can we be oppressive to them? We tried, you know. The challenge of BDS in Palestine is the fact that they are actually not very strong among the Palestinians who are living in the West Bank or Gaza. And I would talk about anti-normalization, which is the offshoot of the BDS. They are an intellectual elite. They are a part of the Palestinian conversation on how we approach this conflict. I respect the fact that they are using sometimes non-violent tactics, and when they use violent tactics, we go after them, trust me. My issue with the anti-normalization groups, two things. First of all, they go after the weak links in the peace camp, and normally these are the girls or the women who participate in the so-called dialogue programs, assuming that women in Palestine have no agency, have no brains, and can be easily brainwashed. No, sir, I'm sorry. We are very, very strong, and ask my grandmother. The second, anti-normalization have been used as a propaganda tool by the Israeli government to contribute to the dominant narrative about the Palestinians that they are not interested in peace. So be aware of that. In general, I, as a peace activist, don't support this or that, but as a peace activist also willing to engage in a conversation. If I'm willing to engage in a conversation with a settler, I must also be willing to be engaged in a conversation with BDS and anti-normalization.
We still have two questions. The 1967 and right of return. I assume the gentleman who asked this question kind of asking about what could be a contradiction here. So if you can clarify this issue.
So I am a refugee. My grandfather is a refugee in 1948. He has the key to his house that he left in 1948. And I do have Israeli friends. My grandfather, he showed me the key to his house every single day. I looked at it. I touched it. You know, it defined my morality, defined who I am. I always questioned, what does he exactly want me to do with it? Does he want me to fight? Does he want me to kill? You know, my grandfather's experience with the key is different than my experience. It's a physical experience to him. To me, it's something that I touch that I know shaped the core things in my identity. And I feel lucky because I touched the things that shaped me. Each one of us in the room today has that key that shaped your identity. It could be your religion, it could be your sexuality, it could be your nationality, that shape the core values of your identity. Look, to me personally as a refugee, I think I have no power over the past, but I do have power over the future. I'm not anywhere to actually give up my grandfather's story and narrative. Everybody needs to realize that my grandfather's a story, but I need to compromise on what I have to create a better future and peace. To me personally, and I think a lot of people, you know, would not like it, I need to separate the right from the return. The right I cannot compromise on because I have no power over it. It's my grandfather, my history, my father's story. But the return, I need to compromise on it because that's how I actually allow my future, my daughter that it's coming in the way, and my neighbor's daughter that they to live together in peace. The right of return is very hard to deal with. I know a lot of people, it's a very sensitive subject, but we have to be pragmatic, but also we have to recognize the past and that we have lived in. The other thing is, look, in terms of BDS, I don't like that it's there today. It became a political ladder for some leaders that they use it to maintain their power. And today, it's not only that we don't have leaders, it's worse than that. We have warmongers, we have status quo keepers. My grandfather used to always tell me, we Palestinians have the best cause and the worst attorneys. And I think we need to change the players. We need to change the attorney and the strategy. We cannot just depend on tactics that are not going to lead us anywhere. We need to have a national strategy that will actually end the conflict. We don't need, Palestinians and Israelis don't need to, yes, but the Palestinians and Israelis don't need to confirm each other's identity. What they need is, it's a political conflict. They need to end the conflict, a solid solution that will end the conflict for once and forever.
Thank you. And by the idea suggesting changing our attorney, our session comes to an end. I would like to thank our speakers for their contribution and thank you for coming and participating for this session. Thank you so much.